Well, Francesca Albanese, the United Nations rapporteur on Palestine, it is not only a personal pleasure to be talking to you today, but I want to convey on behalf of our ΜέΡΑ25 friends and members that are watching this, their appreciation, our joint appreciation for everything you've been doing so courageously over months and months of this unfolding genocide, which will stigmatize humanity for so many years. So thank you on behalf of everyone, not just on my behalf. Uh, Let me ask you, we are having this conversation now, less than 24 hours after the announcement, finally, of an agreement between Hamas and Israel to effect a ceasefire. What are your feelings about this?
I I don't know. I don't know. Really, I'm still processing it. I feel so happy to see the Palestinians cheering, especially the kids, looking forward to the return of a peaceful normalcy. This is on the one hand. I also know that for many Israelis, this is the end of a nightmare. But is it going to be the end of the nightmare for the Palestinians? For the Palestinians, first of all, we are talking of the Palestinians in Gaza, and people saying, I was listening to the outgoing president of the US saying, "Oh, now the Palestinians can return to their homes, to their life."
Yeah.
Where have you been for the past 15 months, President Biden? For many of them, there are no more houses. And for many of them, the houses, whatever, even the rubbles, will be empty. The entire family, hundreds and hundreds of families have been exterminated. And again, the genocide has happened. I don't know how you feel, Yanis, but somewhat something. I say that, but I'm still processing what it is. Something has broken this year. Again, this was not a war. This was a genocidal war. And all the images of all these people, all these children killed, amputated, brutalized, starved, left in flooded tents, frozen to death.
Yeah.
They're still here. So what?
Well, a whole population has been placed on death row for the first time since the Second World War. But there is also another dimension. I just had word from the West Bank that
Well,
settlers under the cover of the IDF are attacking villages now, as we speak.
yeah.
And this is not a ceasefire in Palestine. It's a ceasefire only in Gaza, from how I
Yeah.
understand. And remember, the original idea of Ariel Sharon was to move out of Gaza in order to annex and complete the occupation of the West Bank. So, from your perspective, the United Nations perspective, reporting on Palestine, can you comment on, what the Gaza ceasefire means
Mhm.
for East Jerusalem, for the West Bank more generally?
Yeah, Yannis, you nail it. Because as I answered the first question, I said this is only for Gaza.
Mm.
There are some striking features in the agreement. There is the liberation of, I think, 1,700 prisoners. They're all from Gaza. But what about the thousands of people who have been kidnapped, Palestinians who have been kidnapped, arbitrarily detained, tortured? This includes children. This includes journalists, teachers, professors from the West Bank. Since the very beginning, I've written about that. This is why I've said we need to look at Israel's intent in terms of totality of conduct and totality of crimes against the totality of the Palestinians in the totality of the land that Israel illegally occupies and claims as its own. Have you heard anyone talking about withdrawal of Israel's present, civilian and military, tangible and intangible, material and immaterial, because this is what the ICJ has asked, has ordered in July last year, and the General Assembly has given a deadline to Israel to do that. No one is talking about that. And this is the point. West Bank. West Bank is the place where the colonial erasure is advancing through other means and through other crimes and through other actors. Because there you have the Israeli army, the settlers, armed settlers. And now you also have the repression from the Palestinian Authority.
It was poignant that you said that not all the Palestinian hostages are going to be released, and especially not the ones from West Bank. And by the way, I'm talking about hostages so that I can be symmetrical. There are Israeli hostages and there are Palestinian hostages. There are no convicts or prisoners. They are hostages. They are the hostages by an army of occupation. My thought, as we were speaking, my thought wandered in the direction of the family of Marwan Barghouti, who's been in prison for decades now, precisely because Israel does not want any leadership to emerge within the Palestinians that is representative of the Palestinians and which can actually pave the ground for peace, because Israel does not want peace. If a white settler colonial project loathes peace.
I think that Israel somewhat wants peace as long as it implies the subjugation of the Palestinians as a temporary measure toward their erasure. The plan of this settler colonial project, as it continues, is not the integration or the weakening of the indigenous Palestinians, because as non-Jewish, they have no place, no belonging in the Jewish state. This is very clear. And this is the problem I have with the State of Israel. It's not the State of Israel per se, it's how the State of Israel behaves. The State of Israel is quintessentially as an apartheid state. I wish it was different. This has nothing to do with the Jewish people. It's about the design to subjugate, oppress, dominate another people till annihilation. And unfortunately, Yanis, it's happening. It has not happened for one reason, because the Palestinians do not give up. Yeah. The Palestinians could have, I mean, when Rafah was invaded, I don't know what you think, but this is my 2 cents. When Rafah was invaded in May, till then, the push of the army through evacuations orders and safe zones had been southward, from the north to the south. When Rafah when Israel entered Rafah, it pushed Palestinian east and south as much as it could. And as it saw that the Palestinians were not moving, and as it saw that the pressure was mounting, then it gave up and it started pushing them to eastward. Westward, not eastward, westward toward the sea, in an area like forensic architecture has documented that is totally unsustainable, unlivable. But the Palestinians have resisted in the little that remain of their land, and still they resist in the little, I mean, not the little, but in what remains of their land in East Jerusalem and the rest of the West Bank, or in Israel itself. But it's very hard. It is big. And if we don't keep the pressure on Israel, it will be harder and harder.
Well, speaking of pressure, and going back to your contribution as a lawyer and a rapporteur for the United Nations, one of the valiant contributions you've made was, and I've seen you do this in press conference after press conference from one country to the other. You're taking your own views and beliefs out of the equation. And when you talk about genocide, you insist that this is not a matter of opinion. Can you speak to, is this genocide from a legal perspective?
Look, I was listening to you, and as you were introducing your question, I was saying it's something you put your opinions aside. This is so true. You have not even an idea of how true it is, because probably you have not heard me saying that. But in the beginning, I was not sure. I mean, I had really a superficial back then understanding of what genocide was, because it's a quite niche. When I went back to study what genocide is from a legal point of view, looking at the cases and the jurisprudence, I realized where my mistake came from is that we tend to associate genocide to extermination and mass killing, to Rwanda or the Holocaust. But genocide is something really deeper. And in retrospect, and then I'll tell you why, from a legal point of view, I think that the Palestinian genocide, the genocide of the Palestinians, is the textbook of genocide. As Ras Sigal had really brilliantly put it, because it's what the conceiver of the term genocide had in mind, the settler colonial genocide, erasure of a people, annihilation of a people, which doesn't mean killing them all. In fact, in the Genocide Convention, the killing is one of 5 acts, but genocide is a crime constituting made of the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, religious, racial or national group as such. So the group is targeted as such. And what does constitute genocide? Several acts of killing members of the group, inflicting several severe mental and bodily harm, creating conditions calculated to bring about the destruction of the group, or also, not even these, it's a prevention of birth and transfer of children. So you see, there are genocidal acts that resonate with settler colonial genocides, like in Canada and Australia, where the genocide was primarily carried out by breaking the bloodline of the Aboriginal on the one hand, and then the First Nations and Métis, etc. In Canada, separating the kids or preventing births.
I'm glad you mentioned Australia and Canada and the United States, of course, First Nations peoples, Aborigines, and so on. Because recently I was in a debate with a passionate defender of Israel's right to implement genocidal policies. He said to me, do you agree, Yanis, that expecting of Israel things that we don't expect of the great major democratic states of the world is racist? I said, well, go on. He said, well, why should we expect Israel not to engage in genocidal practices when the whole of the United States was essentially a grand genocide, as was Canada and Australia? The point, the vile point, is that what do we expect of the Anglosphere in particular, or Germany? Think of what Germany did in Namibia, right? I mean, or Belgium in the Congo, they practice genocide. So why should they, if they retain a kind of allegiance to their past, why should the representatives of these states think of Israel as doing something out of the ordinary?
Why Israel should be held to a different standard to the other liberal democracies born from genocides or colonial powers that spread genocide, committed genocide across the world? Several answers. First of all, because after 1948, the world enacted a legal framework which prohibits genocide. So what was permitted in 1913 or in the 15th and 16th century is clearly prohibited today, and it's prohibited to a point that genocide is to be prevented, stopped, and punished. So Israel can commit genocide, and in fact, it has committed genocide. But now it will have to face the consequences.
You report to the General Secretary, the Secretary General of the United Nations, to the United Nations. What is your sense of the manner in which your reports, and of course, what we see on our screens every day, is affecting the atmosphere both within the Security Council and the General Assembly of the United Nations? And finally, would it make any difference if the United Nations admitted the state of Palestine formally in its ranks?
So what kind of difference my reports are making? Well, my reports to the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly produce a response that reflects the state of the world. In the sense, there is a fierce opposition by a small number of countries, very, very small, no more than 5, open opposition. And then the rest from the West, of course, Israel and 4 of his best allies, closest allies. Then there is sort of silence, silent appreciation, happy that I said those things, but not courageous enough or not enabled enough because of lack of representation to be able to say that, or just for political convenience, which is another good number of states in the West, the abstainers. And then there is the absolute majority of member states who support my work, who express admiration, and who take those words, the recommendations that I make seriously. But the point, Yanis, is that the world is still not equal. The world is still made of certain powers who have more influence on the international system than others, and have still the capacity to pivot and to, I wouldn't say to manipulate, but to turn the system upside down when it plays out or it tries to protect interests that are not in line with the I would say, the imperialist interests of some. This is so in the UN, there is not, in the Security Council, this is the reality. The Security Council has been so far paralyzed, largely paralyzed by, or slowed down by the veto of the United States, by the United States. However, would the situation be different had the United Nations and the Security Council formally recognized Palestine's membership as, Palestine as a member, full member of the United Nations? I think so for one reason, because had we got there, it would have been because of a profound conviction and motivation of member states that this was a cause worth fighting for. So while we still have many Western states who do not recognize Palestine out of hypocrisy, because it makes no sense whatsoever from a legal point of view, from a political, ethical point of view, but still do not want to upset Israel and the United States. So it means that fundamentally, there are member states in the United Nations who have been preaching for 30 years about the two-state solution, but it has been just kicking the can in the air, because when it takes like a little effort more and more coherence and more compliance with international law to walk the talk, they step back. So this is the world we live in.
One last question, because I know you're busy and you have to rush to other things. The elephant in the room, which I wasn't going to mention, actually.
Which one?
Donald Trump, of course. He's just about to move into the White House. We know what he did in the period 2016 to 2020.
Yeah.
He was more Zionist than Netanyahu in his actions. But I was stunned a few days ago when I saw that he retweeted or reposted on his own Twitter, Truth Social, a talk by a good friend and colleague of mine, Jeff Sachs, who was referring to Netanyahu as a son of a bitch who has been instrumental in essentially hoodwinking the United States State Department and the Pentagon into his never-ending wars, essentially damaging very substantially the United States, both economically and in terms of its image around the world, especially in the global south. That was what Jeff Sachs was saying. And the Donald actually reposted that. And I was stunned. Any comments? Any thoughts about what we should expect now that there is a change of guard in the White House?
Well, take my comment with a grain of salt because I'm not a political analyst, but as someone who has followed the damage that the Trump administration has made to the Palestinians with the recognition of Jerusalem as a capital of Israel, with the tsunami, as I called it back in 2017, that it provoked against UNRWA. So I'm cognizant that, especially with the kind of government, the administration that he has prepared to start in a few days, chances that the rights of the Palestinians will be anywhere near to the heart of the presidents are very slim, if absent. However, while the Palestinians will not be a priority, what I've learned, what I've seen this year is that there is a difference between Israeli Zionists or Zionists in general and the uber colonizer that we have in Israel at the moment, like the settler-led movement, which is in the government, Yanis. And I'm not sure that Trump would support the wild, really, when I mean wild, it's material, it's not just metaphorical, the wild assault on the Palestinians through the means of war, causing instability, because I don't think that he's ready to spend more US funds on any war that Israel wants to embark on. This is my feeling. Is it a reassurance? No, of course not, because many in his administration would be fine with the continuous erasure of the Palestinians through silent means, but at a low cost for the US, for the US administration. This is my feeling. Of course, this is not enough. But is it going to be worse than what has been done over the past 4 years? Especially the past, it's hard to fathom. Although, look, I learned this year never to say what can happen worse than this. Because the moment I say that, something worse happens.
Well, thank you so much for connecting with us today and tonight when it will be shown. Do you want to just try to finish off on a not optimistic, but at least hopeful note, with a message to our people here in Greece, in Europe, in the world?
Have I not been optimistic? No, yes, I mean, first of all, I came to love Greece more than ever this year because I've encountered so many wonderful and engaged Greek people. But I want to say something I tell everyone. The reality in Palestine epitomizes old, current, and probably future injustices. This is the world naked. This is the world in terms of human relations. Do we want to continue with it? Because if the answer is yes, I don't care, well, sooner or later it will touch us. And I expect sooner rather than later, because all injustices are connected. Economic injustices, environmental injustices. And therefore, I think that Palestine today is a test for what we want to do next and be next. So staying silent and inactive should not be an option. And remember that justice starts at home. So go after your policymakers, go after the businesses, the charities, the banks, see where your pension funds go, because there is nothing, and I'm telling you because this is what I'm working on at the moment, the matrix, the economic and financial matrix that underpin the occupation and with all the crimes that are part of it would not be possible without the contribution of each of us. And when I say each of us, I mean it.
Well, Francesca Albanese, thank you so much for being with us.
Not very optimistic.
Oh, no, I think this is a great source of hope. The notion that for as long as we breathe, we struggle, because nothing else is fun in this life. You know, succumbing to despair and succumbing to inhumanity does not contribute to a happy existence. So, no, I consider the way in which you concluded the most hopeful contribution you could have made, at least during this conversation. You have a lot more to do, and once more, our appreciation, our collective appreciation, and best wishes.
Thank you so much. Stay strong. Keep fighting. Bye-bye.